Hello, and thank you for listening to the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. Before we begin, we apologize for the technical difficulties that appear in today's episode. As always, we thank all of you for your support and enjoy.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Kipp Morrill, and I am one of the hosts of the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. And I'm always joined by my good friend, Tate Hieronymus.
Good.
Tate, how you
just
doing?
Sitting in a rainy day in my car. It's a rainy day, and I'm sitting in my car. I'm not sitting in the day.
Oh, and I'm assuming you are in the great state of
Yes,
Iowa.
the Midwest, Tornado Alley.
The Midwest. And I guess times are tough because I understand you're living in the car.
Yeah, I'm homeless now, and I'm living here.
Oh, well, that's not too good, but at least we're super glad that you are on the podcast and part of our team here. So that's fantastic.
For sure.
So I guess tonight will be kind of an interesting evening. We'll kind of be revisiting, and actually I'm pretty stoked about it. I think what we could call it is Ramblings with Rowdy. So what we've got is Rowdy Kelley, one of the main members of the Bluff Creek Project, and he's agreed to come on the show, and we're just going to talk about a variety of things that are going on, and I think Rowdy's also going to treat us a little bit to tell us a little bit about what it's like being in the movie industry and behind the scenes, and some of these different Bigfoot movies because of his involvement with the in Humboldt County there. So without further ado, let's welcome our good friend Rowdy Kelley.
Hey
Rowdy,
guys, how you doing?
Good evening.
Very nice to be back on this
Awesome.
show, the Bluff Creek Podcast, and I had real quick. I had an interesting visitor this weekend, the Reverend Jeffrey Kelley. He had actually spot, and he said, this is not Kipp's first to podcasting. And he reminded me that I guess you've attempted this before and done it with starting him off on a podcast. Is that correct?
That is actually correct. It's been a number of years that I was a part of the Squatchers Lounge podcast in the very beginning, and until Jeff got the Reverend Jeffrey Kelley got some more talented and more capable co-hosts, which has been great. And that's been a long-running podcast. So, yeah, it's great to hear that I saw his Facebook post that he was in the Redwoods. And, of course, one of the first times that I believe that maybe he met you, Rowdy, was, and this kind of ties into the Finding Bigfoot show.
Right. And, well, we got lots of history there, don't we? Especially with you guys. Yes, Jeffrey... I think the first time I met him is when you guys came up. Were you with him when he came up during Finding Bigfoot? I think that was 2014.
I was. And what happened was we were driving over with my little travel trailer. We were going to be staying up there at one of the lagoons, and it was actually my birthday. And we had gotten a hold of you and said, hey, we're looking for handsome, extremely talented people to sit on bar stools in the background.
Oh, okay. So, I remember that. You guys were coming up and we were shooting the show. Okay, copy. And I'm like, okay, how can I get you guys involved? And yes, we need a little background crowd for a bar scene. I think it was when we were talking to Bobo's father.
And that was exactly it. We pulled up in my pickup, and we pulled up right next to Fireball, and right next to Bobo's dad, and then of course Bobo came out, and so that was the first time that I met Bobo. And then we came in, and actually Matt was not there, but we met Cliff for the first time, and then we met Renee. And I got to say that meeting the three of them, of course, was a thrill, because they're always, they're part of the Bigfoot scene. But wow, they were just so amazingly friendly and cool. Cliff offered to buy us our lunch. We took pictures with them, and it was just a really, really cool experience. And so always remember that and appreciate that you made that happen, Rowdy, with your connections, if you will.
It's just part of the job when you're local. And I think the same thing happens similar with Tate on another 2-hour special. Now, I've worked on 3 of their 2-hour specials, which is a longer haul production, so to say. And we, get everything in line to have enough material for our show. So it takes a little more planning. And I think the second time the third time they were here was the last time. And that's the first time I met you, Tate. We were going up.
Yep.
Recreation of, I believe it was that Dry Lake Mountain, that a therm that may or may not have been of something sitting on a rock, as I remember. And
yes, yeah, that's right.
Shows like this we'll do recreations, and this is not trying to fib or anything like that. We're just trying to show kind of what happened, since there was no cameras, and somebody's recounting the story, and we go ahead and fulfill it with a nice little reenactment. And you were part of that. That was kind of cool. We went up and
I was. Yeah, that was really fun.
And you got to meet quite a few people. And
yep.
I think that was probably your first immersion into the Bluff Creek Project members. With
I met Steven a couple of years before that, actually, and then I want to say I met Kip too before that also.
I did at it was at the Willow Creek, the Bluff Creek days. No, I'm sorry, the Bigfoot days that they held early in honor of the show when Bob Gimlin Way was unveiled and all of that. I brought my travel trailer and parked it in front of Steven's bookstore, and we had the campfire, and we had some music and some beverages and such. So yeah, that was a great time.
Day. So we had
that was the same day. Yeah, I thought it was the day before.
No, it was the same day, because I remember later that night, because I had been scouting all day for that location, and I wasn't there for the last half of the whole Bigfoot Days reenactment, which actually that year turned out to be a better crowd and a better venue for the vendors than the actual Bigfoot Days that year, because they were actually pretty smoked out because
that's right.
It was really beneficial. It was very beneficial to the town just to have quite a few people come to town, because they knew Finding Bigfoot was going to be shooting, and we didn't charge the vendors, and there was no admission fee or anything like that for everybody to come in. And that day kind of got away from us, and we missed shooting a few things because they allowed all the cast members to start talking and taking pictures and signing autographs with people. And that turned into just this incredible line that I think it took probably 2 or 3 hours to get through. And it actually got us kind of behind on the day. And I think it was really later in that day is when we went up and finally shot that scene, because I was looking for that scene. Just something to supplement. Anyway, that was a pack-filled day, and those were good times, actually. Coming into town and having all people in town, it was really fun.
I just happened to be in my job as a firefighter when the actual Bigfoot days took place, like you said, and it was smoked out. But I was I was actually working on that fire that was smoking the place
yes.
out. So
I remember that too,
was,
Kip. You were there. You and another, I believe, a lady was with you that were doing kind of the liaisons, and in the crowd, you were in your uniforms, and you were on standby to do the Bigfoot call. Be the Bigfoot call judge if Bobo did not show up.
That's right.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's right. I remember. Well, I remember. I think he showed up, but it was later because I remember I was watching Monkey for him for a little while. But actually, that might have been. I get things confused. But yeah, it was one of the public information officers and myself, because typically they would just send the public information people to these events, but they just happened to know somehow that I had an affiliation with the Bigfoot community, and so as much as they respect that and love that and look up to me because of that, they sent me on special assignment. So, but yeah, it was a
that was
sure enjoyed it.
Go
I got a question. So how did you ever get involved with the movie industry? I'm just curious. I don't think I've ever even heard the
movie industry
story.
goes back pretty far for me. I moved back to California. Now, Humboldt County, I great-grandfather was born in Humboldt County in 1900. My father was born here. My grandmother was born here. My mom was actually born in Washington, but they moved here in 1951. So I got a pretty rich history in Humboldt County. But I had been, through my adolescent years, living in another state. My mom had remarried, but in 1994, I decided to move back to Humboldt County, which I considered home. And I wanted to finish up my college career with a film major, which was offered at State University. So I went in with the initial intention of being actually writing my own degree, which HSU offered that at the time. Now, the reality of wildlife cinematography didn't sink in until later. And actually, the wildlife department was very stringent, and it was just a little bit beyond what I wanted to do. So I just stuck to the film part of it. And but during that during that time in film school, I took a variety of classes. I took a lot of recreation and business classes, which I had taken before in Texas. During the day in school, and at night I'd be working at the TV station, working the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news. Now I started as just a typical grunt in a local TV station, which I worked in. I eventually did floor cameras, but I was way up. I directed live news. I did graphics. I did quite a few different things for the station. I even ran their live broadcast van, which we'd have to hook up to a repeater up on a hill. Last year, almost a year and a half, all I did was make commercials for the local market. And at the same time, I was trying to finish my film degree. Anyway, I jumped on commercials. I worked on first XXX, did some second unit work with them. Did all kinds of music videos. I'd have to travel to LA and work on these. I did a car commercial and got immersed into the film industry, the commercial industry, television industry, which I already had quite quickly the first few years, and ended up working a couple of movies in San Francisco, doing location site managing. In the meantime, I would do which were really the big ones. The car commercials have all the toys. They have all expensive equipment, the robotic arms, what we call Russian arms. And I was just immersed in that.
So, Rowdy, would it be fair to say that because of your interest in all things Bigfoot and Sasquatch, that and having, obviously have connections within the movie industry, would it be fair to say that those two passions have kind of married up to where you're kind of known for that now? So when a production company is considering something like that you are
if somebody
that
calls
comes
our
to
local
mind?
film commissioner for Humboldt, which is basically the Northern California region, or the coastal region, if it's Bigfoot related and they're looking, yes, they know to refer me. I'm well known for that. But that was something new. I had been doing this. My first big commercial I worked on was 1999. And it wasn't until 2011 that I worked on anything Bigfoot related. And I was going through earlier thinking about this podcast, hearing Stephen, or I don't know if I was hearing him or I was reading him in the Lost Coast Outpost, probably a year prior to me getting involved in Bigfoot. Going back and forth with somebody, and that was something that kind of brought Bigfoot to my mind. But it's something that I jumped into voluntarily. The first movie was tapes, Bigfoot tapes, like a found footage type. But they came up here. They wanted to film this up here, and I give Corey Grant much props. He was like, the guy that wrote this script, it's kind of based, I'd really love to shoot this whole thing here. And I gave him props for that. Let's do it, let's find the locations that you want. We found everything that was pretty much exactly what they wanted and what they were looking for. And they came up and started shooting it. I ended up doing just so much on that film. And I ended up being a part of that film as a cast member, because the one cast member that I eventually played, he was kind of upset with the director and the production team and ended up leaving after the first scene. I was involved enough, and I mean, there's all kinds we could talk about on this movie. We could do a whole podcast on this movie, but what ended up doing is I ended up doing stunts on the movie. I got jerked through a window. I got to drive a car fast. I was the car stunt driver, and I had a small role. But what's funny is the role that I had in the movie was basically the guy that was outside trying to protect everybody else. And I won't give away the movie if you haven't seen it, but it turned strange. Bigfoot is the guardian, not so much the bad person in this, or the bad character in this movie, which they keep threatening they're going to make a sequel to it. But
are they are you serious?
I hear
awesome.
Corey, but when I read the script, when I first read the script and they had a lot going on, I showed them quite a few holes that they had in the script as far as with their timeline and how things were happening when they were trying to do this found footage, and we kind of corrected some of that. But as I read the script and really got involved with it, I realized the story is beyond the found footage, because at the end of the movie, you pretty much go, what the hell just happened? I have no idea. And that's basically what they need to do is they need to make a narrative movie that shows you basically everything that happened that you don't see in the film, which is all kinds of craziness and just endless amounts of subplots that you could add into there as that thing got more. Those guys do that. I'm not going to talk bad about the film, but there's a few people that didn't get paid in the county, and that's part. I took that personally because that's part of my job. When productions come up here, is to make sure they don't take advantage of our locations, our personnel, our vendors, all that kind of stuff, because we want to keep this area attractive for films to come up here, and also attract people to want films to come up here, because we're kind of a small area. Anyway, regardless, that film, Bobo came on as, actually I hired him as security at night when we'd close the set, because we were shooting pretty deep in the Humboldt area. And it actually was like a rite of passage every day when we drive the crew. And coincidentally, I drove a third of the crew to set every day in a big passenger van. And it was a gnarly road that we took to get to this one set location. And we did 7 days out there. And that was a whole adventure in itself, getting all the equipment out there, all the Hollywood type machines, honey wagons, all that kind of stuff. But we made it happen. And that's the kind of stuff I do, is make productions happen in extreme locations.
And you're the guy, Rowdy, that reminds them that this is Humboldt County, and if you want certain things on Sunday, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, it's not so much on Sunday. It's like after 6.
After 6.
After 6 is not a whole lot open. So, it is a different environment up here, but obviously we're just quenched with beautiful scenery and locations, and we've got quaint villages and townscapes. Anyway, Bobo came on, and we hired him as basically the security guy, but they were planning on having a Bigfoot suit ready for that movie. And the special effects guy was pretty far behind on getting that Bigfoot suit ready. It was kind of like the movie Jaws. They didn't quite have the special effects ready. So we started shooting the movie without the Bigfoot. And in the meantime, they had a guy that was supposed to play the Bigfoot, and he was, I'd say, about the same size as Bobo, but maybe a little more fit. I wouldn't say more talented or more nimble than Bobo. Regardless, Bobo ended up kind of helping the guy as we got towards the end of the film. He became like the guy to tell the guy how to walk, because as soon as that guy put on the whole suit, he was doing the typical looking down at his feet, tripping on stuff, really was uncomfortable trying to walk around in this suit. And Bobo was kind of there to help him, like, get the walk down and get the movements down. And if you actually watch the movie, there's just a very light glimpse of a Bigfoot in the way far background of one scene. And that's pretty much it for that really nice suit. And it was actually a pretty good looking suit and a pretty good special effects job.
That was a super cool scene too in the movie.
Yeah, and they just never quite got it right, so they kind of adjusted their script to fit that not really popping out at the earlier, because they just didn't have it done. But lo and behold, Bobo was on set quite a bit, and I was already an acquaintance of Bobo from just the HSU crowd and Southern Humboldt. So he and I knew each other. I knew him, and when he saw me, he recognized me. He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And we talked about old times. But he started telling us about. He had just heard about the Justin Shemia shooting. And so he had just fresh knowledge on that, and he was telling us all about that at that time. And they had just started shooting Finding Bigfoot. I think they'd shot probably 3 or 4 episodes, something like that. But they were already doing well, I guess. The ratings were looking pretty good on the station, on the network. And probably, I'd say 3 or 4 months, maybe less than that. After that, I got the call to do the 2-hour special with Finding Bigfoot, and just really got involved then, helping set that up. And actually, the first time we made an attempt to go to the site, a week before I started working on that, there was a BFRO expedition that was based at Fish Lake in Bluff Creek. And my friend Robert Leiterman, who I'd already worked on a movie with, was I knew involved with that. So I called him. I'm like, I need to know what's going on in Bluff Creek and all this. He goes, well, guess what? There's a BFRO expedition and we're going to be going out there. And I'm like, well, can you get me hooked up? And he said, yeah, you bet. Come on out. You'll be my guest. And I went out and got to experience a BFRO expedition, which I was mildly impressed with their presentation. I wasn't very impressed with their hospitality and food and what you got
Lack
for
of
your
permit.
money. At the time I didn't really think about that, but I should have. But that again, just like the last movie, that is a whole story in itself. That whole weekend, that was a great weekend.
Wow.
But I was there with the advanced producer for Finding Bigfoot, and we went around. Robert was actually leading a group of people up from the bridge and taking Roger and Bob's route up to the film site. And which, Kip, you've done that with us, is not, I wouldn't say it's a hard or extremely hard journey, but it's hard. Yeah.
It is.
No, it's
not for the faint of heart.
Just because of the terrain on the side kind of inhibits you from walking along the creek. I would say 70 to 80, maybe more % of the time you're walking up the creek, actually through the water to reach your destination. Anyway, he had 14 people, I think, on that. And I didn't know where the site was. And Jen, who was the advanced producer, and I went down, and we're kind of waiting at the Bluff Creek bottom. We knew how to get down there. Robert had told us, he goes, go down the road. There might be a log in the road, and you get to the berm and walk down to the bottom of and we're like, okay, we did all that. And we sat there and waited all day. I walked all up and down that creek looking around. Nothing to me looked like the film, aside from maybe the creek. Creek kind of looked like it, but I couldn't tell. Robert's crew did not show up until later, and it was actually concerning whether everybody was going to be able to turn around and get back before dark, because they had a few people that were, I don't want to say out of shape, but they were not probably the best people that'd be walking up that creek. And in fact, one man was quite overweight. And my concern, as soon as he talked about this 3.5 mile journey, and I said, you got 14 people going with you. It means that's almost 7 miles by the time you get back, walking them down this creek. Do you have any outs? Because I'd been working in the film industry long enough to know that you got to put safety first. And Robert at the time was just like, well, they're going to figure that out. And I'm like, well, I'm glad we're going to be on the other end. And lo and behold, that was the case. We had 2 people that needed to get out of there at that time. They were not going to make it back. In fact, it would have been a serious problem if they had got hurt down there, because the one man was quite weighty, and it would have taken several people to get him out of that creek bottom, which is extreme.
That would not be a fun journey.
No. And lo and behold, long story short, that guy a year later gave Robert a call, and he said, that day changed my life. I've lost 120 something pounds. I've been hiking, and it was just a great story to hear later on, that it changed a person's life just hiking up there and making that happen, even though he didn't do the round trip, but it all worked out. But we never actually.
I can't believe that they actually were planning to do that round trip. I know that, when I did it, of course, we had the pickup on the other side. I think it was Jamie's pickup, and pulled everybody out from the berm. But that's a pretty lengthy trip, especially for
if you're not in shape for it. I guess what I noticed is my hamstrings were just cramping that night. You remember? I think I complained to you guys. I'm like, my hamstrings are just cramping up, because you have to pick your feet up out of the water and push through the water quite often. And you're a hiker, you're a fireman. You got such old muscle memory that that was nothing for you once you got going, right?
Oh, exactly. Well, because I'm a physical specimen, but that's neither here nor there.
I remember my first time hiking that thing. Man, that was a beast.
But we never went to the site. Robert, it was just too late in the day. There's a few people I think that went up to the site with Robert, but my concern was burning them out. So when we ended up going back down, with Finding Bigfoot, it was Cliff and Bobo disappeared. And we're like, where'd they go? We're going to this. They went to the site and they came back. I'm like, where the hell's the site? And they went, obviously at where the bat boxes is, how far up it is to the site. And that was pushing it late in the day. And we had a helicopter coming for that scene. We had Bob, the whole cast. Actually, Tom Yamaron was there as a liaison, so all kinds of people were there. Anyway, we walked up to the site, and it was further up than the executive producers or the supervising producers wanted. They're like, "Why didn't you guys tell us that?" And I was like, I did not know it was this far up at all. I thought we were just down here at the bottom. I didn't know the particulars at the time. Bob, as he walked up to that site, he goes, "Yep, I remember all this. I remember walking up. We were on the far side of the creek walking in." And he got to a certain point and he goes, "This is when we saw her." And he said the horses started going crazy here. And this is where Roger started filming. Cliff jumped into the act and kind of recreated it. And then we had Bobo across the way. And I looked at it. I was just like, there, because I had already, probably 100 times by then, just looking at it over and over and over again. And I was like, I do not see that this is the film site. I do not see it at all. But going back to the BFRO expedition, Robert, I think it was the second night, Stephen showed up. And Stephen had, I believe, the Christopher Murphy book, and they both sat me down and pretty much presented me with what they were doing as far as trying to find or rediscover the site and how much work they had done. And that night I'd looked at the frame by frame progressions, and I was really impressed with the detail of the creature. And I myself see a hackle rise after she looks back and sees Bob crossing the creek, which I've seen on dogs. I've seen on cats. I've seen, you feel it when you get unnerved, stand up. And that's pretty much what I saw the creature doing as she realized, as I was told through the story, as Bob crosses the creek and she's pretty much getting anxious. So that kind of sucked me into the film itself. But at the time, I didn't think the film site was that important. But I liked Robert, and Stephen was very impressive. And I'm like, okay, when this show's over, I'll help you guys out. And Robert kept bantering me to come out with them. And so I think it was probably just a few weeks after we were finished filming Finding Bigfoot is when we did the grid plot survey that we did. And as we crossed through that dense forest, the whole flat, and we're setting our north to south lines and measuring that, as I remember, it was 385 feet from where Roger starts filming all the way across to the other side, which is the big tree, which is directly north. We ran right into the big tree, the leaning tree, and that assortment of trees. And I noticed that the maple in between the big tree and the leaning tree had a crook in it. In the film, you can kind of see it probably about 10 feet up, just a slight bend in that maple tree. And there it was. Well, that time it was like 40, 45, 46 years later. There it was, huge and bigger with the same crook in it. And I go, there's no doubt. That's three different things right there that all match up. This is the right spot. And I don't think I was convinced it was the right spot until then. And as we've slowly grid plotted it, and as I looked at the film more, I realized this is probably the most important piece that we have for Bigfoot. It's the most tangible thing. We have a piece of celluloid that shows something very good, because that first few years of me getting into Bigfoot, I looked at every video that came across. I think Stephen started the coalition, and we had a lot of videos coming in at that time, and I was part of that process of debunking. And there was a sleeping bag video. You remember that one? underneath the bench. It was just ridiculous. A miniature Sasquatch came into camp, and it was all lit up. But what they did at the beginning, they released a couple of different frames, and it shows a guy laying down, because I knew it was an IR illumination. And as all of us know, in IR illumination, some materials really give off a reflective image in the IR, or when you're looking through your night vision. Anyway, so the first 2 years, I was looking at every video and just nothing, all the old videos, everything, just nothing compared to the Patterson-Gimlin film. Mainly because I guess so many people had looked at it and done so many analysis on it, and there was so much information on YouTube and on the net about it, and obviously some books written about it. But as 2012, when Daniel Perez is interviewing all of us to give this Bigfooter of the Year award, I was like, I came late, I don't want to, this is Stephen and Robert's, I can't pull in that kind of thing. I have not been here long enough to deserve Bigfooter of the Year. Stephen and Robert have put in a lot of time really going up and down this creek. I just came in on, it was coincidence. It's nothing else for my part. And I did help out. I'm the guy that held the smart end of the tape and kept everybody lined, kept us going north and south. And the day we grid plotted that site, it was a long day. And I this is what I give Robert. Robert is our battery. He's the guy that keeps us going all the time. He will not quit. And he definitely kept Stephen and I going, mainly me, going that whole day to get as much work done as we could get that day, because we were limited the next few days on getting that work done. Anyway, since then, I've been a part of $10 million Bigfoot bounty. I think that was probably a year later. They came to town. They had called me and said they were coming in, and I became their local producer, which we call on the TV side, it's called a fixer. But I was also the expert, so to say, on going to Bluff Creek and going to the film site. But that thing was a strange competition, and it took me a while to really encompass what they were trying to do. And by the time I did, I was like, okay, well, I gave them all the ideas of what they were going to do in $10 million Bigfoot bounty, as far as what kind of, and the final competition, which was going up the Patterson-Gimlin route from their camp all the way to the film site, which none of those people actually made it to the film site. They only made it to the bad boxes and then basically came back out. Now, a few of them went past it, but I don't think any of them actually made it to the film site. But that was another interesting thing, and I probably got a little bit of guff once I saw what kind of a farce the show was. but I actually knew Roe at the time. I knew Justin. I didn't know Stacy Brown or Dave. I got to meet Todd Desatel and, of course, Dean Kane. But I remember seeing Justin and Roe, because I think I don't think I'd met Justin. Justin and I just kind of knew each other, I believe is what it was. But Roe, and I think it was Kip, you were on that. We had all been to Mill Creek. Robert got us keys in behind that gate, and Bart, we had Kurt Brandenburg, I believe, too.
Yeah, that's right.
Nadia was
we
had
there.
The R2D2
Roe. I believe Roe Sahibi almost passed away from freezing to death.
It would have been a slow. It would have been a slow, quiet.
It was cold.
Yes, it was.
It was a very cold night.
That doesn't sound fun.
It was extremely cold and then wet. And I remember we had Rowdy had brought his Easy Up, and I believe Kirk's Easy Up, and we had my campfire, my little propane campfire, which we were all gathered around, and it's just those are those fun times that makes it memorable and makes it fun, and so it was a super good time.
That Robert will find the coldest, wettest place to camp.
Yes,
just to test us.
Robert, I think purposely likes to find whatever's the most uncomfortable options. He will take that. I remember for his retirement, I gave him this wonderful gift that he wouldn't use, and then when he did use it, he wouldn't use it correctly. But
well, that turned out to be, we thought it was, but then we found out as the night spring under us, and it was already a super cold night. This is Robert's retirement party. It was just Kip and Robert and I, and we were out pretty deep into Bluff Creek, and we did a big hike. That was good times though. I remember that was the first time I took a rock from the fire, one of the big rocks, and stuck it right next. I don't think I stuck it in my sleeping bag, but I stuck it like underneath my sleeping bag or something like that. It was just one of those. It was just so warm. Yeah. Some of the coldest nights.
That was Elk
some of the
Valley.
Coldest nights I've been camping have been either out with you guys bigfooting, whether it be Humboldt Redwoods, Prairie Creek Redwoods, Bluff Creek, and then actually on Finding Bigfoot. I did a Shasta episode, a 2-hour episode. The morning we left one of our investigation sites, it was 15 degrees. Yeah, we were in this hole, and actually going to Finding Bigfoot. Let's go ahead and talk about that. I have to give those guys props. They actually do go out, and that being an advanced producer and a fixer, we actually go out and interview people, find locations that are hot, and put those guys into legitimate situations for them to at least have an experience or maybe something to happen. They're not faking it, going out for a couple hours, just making it look like they're out there. Those guys are actually out there, and they'll stay out there longer if they think something's happening. And I got to give them that. There's probably a few shows that were pretty comical and probably weren't worth even shooting, but all the ones that we shot, those guys actually took the effort and took it seriously, so to say. And I got to give them that. What else since then? I just kind of been stuck with Finding Bigfoot. Here's a tidbit that's kind of interesting for this podcast. I actually was part of a side project that they tried to spin off. Actually, we just did kind of like a test pilot, and it was going to be for just Bobo. And we shot that up here in Humboldt County, and I was one of the producers on that. We went out and did some fun stuff. We had Bobo in his environment. We had him ab diving. We had him chasing around his buddy that he couldn't find.
Oh.
And they actually had RPG with him. and I had gotten into drones at that time, so I had shot some of their drone work and actually shot some really fun drone stuff. And that was back in the time when you couldn't see what your drone was shooting. You were just kind of flying over and hoping your GoPro caught what they were doing. We got Bobo a few times. He didn't have enough weights on his belts. You could see him just trying to go under, and he couldn't quite go under. He was too buoyant. But we got some fun drone footage of him and RPG going out to sea, and like I said, that really never saw the light of day. I think it was more of a test pilot. But we at that time too, we'd actually shot the Wendy's commercial, which that
was my favorite.
It really
was great.
It was a funny. I wish they would use that more than just Finding Bigfoot, because it was the guys that started College Humor. I can't think of their names right. They were the directors, and
for the Wendy's commercial,
I produced it, cast it. I was the assistant director, and we shot most of that in just one day. It was really a lot of fun. We had a good time with that. I had my best buddies. The only time I've ever had a Bigfoot costume here in Humboldt County that I know of that was worthwhile, and it was the one they use on finding Bigfoot. And I roped one of my buddies into being the Bigfoot in the commercial, and he had a great time.
That's awesome.
So Rowdy, real quick, I'm just curious. I mean, we've got, we had Finding Bigfoot, and that's kind of set the bar. Then we had the $10 million Bigfoot bounty. Then we had Expedition Bigfoot. So we've gotten these other shows that have tried to come along, but clearly Finding Bigfoot had the right formula. But what's next? Is there anything that a Bigfoot show could get out there and actually be successful? And if so, what would be some of your suggestions for making it?
Well, this goes back to debates we had when Finding Bigfoot was big. A real Bigfoot show is not really that marketable, and it's not that exciting. So, to go out to really do it, it needs to be a month or a couple of months entrenched, and get some connection with the land. Now, I'm not going to give away any more Bigfoot shows, because I've been a part of one and I'm in talks with another one. But that is one of the things that we are pushing, especially for this other one, is that we go in with not your typical production team. You don't have a producer, a sound guy, a cameraman, maybe 2 cameramen, and a production assistant and your cast, and expect something to happen. So I think what this pandemic is doing is we're kind of getting more raw. We're looking for something that's not so polished. And that's really what we saw in this last Expedition Bigfoot. It was just so polished. It had so many cool effects and graphics, and they had all the tools, and it was just too clean. And that's not what Bigfooting is about. Bigfooting is about getting out there and getting dirty, and just being part of the environment. And it's not a whole production team. And I think if we're going to have anything that is going to actually give us any evidence, it's not going to be on a big production like that. Now, those are going to.
It's going to be like on a couple guys.
It could be. It could be. And
as a TV show.
I'm not into getting the night encounters, because they're not encounters, they're just experiences. We're not going to prove anything with a FLIR. We're not going to prove anything with hearing sounds at night. We're not going to prove anything hearing a howl or seeing some eyes. If anything, if we want to keep adding to this, we're going to need a daytime footage if we're not going to kill one or catch one. So that work goes into our game cameras. And as you guys know me, every time we walk into Bluff Creek, I have a camera wrapped around my neck. I always have a 4K, what we call a bridge camera, which has a high zoom on it.
Yep.
So that's when I want to see. That's when I want my experiences during the day. At night, it's just an experience. During the day, it can be a sighting. It can be we can record it and we can look at it and do an analysis of it, and have other people do an analysis of it.
Rowdy, there's a show that I really enjoyed that I've watched, and I think there were 6 seasons of it, and it was called Alone. And what I really particularly liked about that was that they dropped these people off in very remote locations, and they needed to survive. Now, if you had a concept similar to that, but had a Bigfooting theme, where you took people and you said, okay, you're going to drop off maybe teams of 2. Or instead of alone, but maybe teams of 2, and basically the idea was who could stay out there the longest, who could stay and gather the most potential evidence in certain locations. I think something like that would be rather interesting.
I'm with you on that. I think you have to just take away that production team, because a lot of those shows that you see, Survivor and Naked and Afraid, there's a production team not too far away from those guys. I think what we're seeing nowadays is people have more capabilities to film on their own. We have more user-friendly cameras, And I think the rawness will come out if we do something like that, where, yeah, you just land two guys. Here's the camera equipment. There's a few batteries, maybe some solar chargers. You guys just record as much as you can. Go for it. And
that's why I like Survivor
sure.
Bigfoot
And
a lot.
I think he set that bar that I think Bigfooting is going to have to follow to get those kind of experiences.
Yeah.
But again, if you're by yourself, even if it is a sighting without any recording, it's just an experience. If you have two people, you have some corroboration. You can say, yeah, you saw it, I saw it, yeah, we both saw it. You can't deny that, but we still need that film footage, or we need some physical evidence. Yeah, I think that's where it's going to go. I think we'll see a lot more Bigfoot shows, but we'll see a smaller production value. This whole coronavirus is changing the whole dynamics. We already had a great base of programs to watch. And right now we've gone through 3 months of not really having anybody produce anything. So people are producing things on their own. And it's one big pie, and we're just going to keep cutting that pie into smaller pieces as far as what you can watch and what people are watching. And this is a niche, Bigfooting. People that are into it are into it. They're stuck in it. They're going to watch everything they can watch on it. And that's slowly growing. And we've seen that with the Coalition and all these TV shows. And that's something I tell people right now, that there's probably not a kid under 14 or 15 that doesn't believe in Bigfoot, because they grew up watching Finding Bigfoot. It's a reality now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, when you were younger, 40 years ago, there was always that person that was the naysayer, and you didn't have that much media just blitzing you with Bigfoot stuff and sightings. Yeah.
You didn't have YouTube. You didn't have Facebook. You didn't have, I had the local bookstore there in Reading where I had my John Green books. And so that was my first introduction, was hearing stories, but maybe a newspaper article once in a while about something interesting. But yeah, now it's everywhere, and it's rather it's interesting. But I like what you talked about when you mentioned this whole coronavirus. In my profession, we've literally been force-fed technology, because that's the only alternative. We're not going to meetings. We're not doing a lot of things. And so in fact, this new job that I just took, where I'll be leaving for Portland here in another month, I interviewed for that job on Zoom with a suit and tie. So
were you wearing pants?
I was. Everyone asks me that, and yes, I was actually, believe it or not. So, but yeah, I think that I like that idea. I like the idea of seeing some new some new footage, and I still think there's a lot to be learned.
I think
out
so,
there.
and we go into the stats. There's actually less people in the woods. I think this is a paradigm shift. I think we'll see people trying to live up to all these commercials that we see of people in their outbacks and they're camping and they're going out and doing all this. That's really hit the mainstream. And I think a lot of people were just watching that, not really living that. I think this will probably incite quite a few people to go out and try to do those kind of things. We're kind of gearing up for it up here in Humboldt. We're hoping that people are looking for entertainment in isolation, or to have a unique experience outside of a crowd, or I that's what's funny about this whole pandemic. Everybody's asking me what's going on, how you feeling, and I go, well, my kids are home and my dogs love it, but otherwise I'm doing the same things I do. I go out 95%, 98% of the time by myself anyway. I'm out in the woods, and we just don't have that many people up here. So honestly, I've been getting out. I just don't go to the store that much. I've been exploring our local redwood waterways quite a bit. And luckily right now we hear rain. We've had a really pretty bad drought this late winter, early spring, and the rivers were looking like they should look in the summer. So I took advantage of it. I've been on them quite a bit, and I scour all up and down riverbanks where people are not. And our rivers here are not that frequented, and looking for tracks, always looking for tracks and finding all kinds of animal tracks and wandering into places that nobody's at. And it's just something that I've done all my life. And I was talking to Bobo the other day, and I started to realize, God, I don't know if I want to have a Bigfoot experience or be the guy that films a Bigfoot or, I don't know if I want that responsibility. Yeah,
that's a weighty responsibility.
That's kind of scares me sometimes when I'm walking into an area and I've got my camera ready and I start hearing things and not so much that I'm afraid of a Bigfoot. It's just afraid of this responsibility that you're going to have.
The weight on your shoulders.
Keep the Bluff Creek Project, the camera project on our shoulders. Here it is. This is what we're going to show you. Figure it out. And that's fun. That's part of it. When we go through thousands of videos that we get after 8 or 9 months of them sitting out there, is the next video going to have Bigfoot on it? Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, that's true.
So. You don't know unless you try, right?
Definitely ticking off all the animals that are in Bluff Creek as far as what's out there.
That's for sure.
That's part of it. We gotta mark off everything that it's not and figure out. Yeah, and something may happen one day. At one time, Jamie thought we should be wrapping this project up, and I said, no, this project never wraps up unless we have a dead Bigfoot.
It just changes, right? It
shifts. What? If Jamie closes it, wraps it up, I'm gonna reopen it.
Well, we've learned over the years. I tell you, between Jamie and I, we've gotten a major college crash course in game cameras and how they work, best positions for them, best positions to get video, and just dependable cameras. At one time, we just had too many cameras. It was hard to keep up with all of them. We've learned to narrow them down to just a few good camera positions. I've rotated a few cameras this winter. And we've tried some new cameras, but we're sticking with Bushnells. Wish they would sponsor us. That'd be great. We gotta start putting.
That'd be amazing.
I don't know if Jamie has or not. That would be great because that's all we use is Bushnells. That's the only thing.
That'd be amazing.
Sitting out there, they just eventually just run out of energy, or just I don't know the way they're made. But those have lasted better than the other brands and been more dependable. Anyway, that's where that.
And tonight's episode is brought to you by Bushnell.
We'll sell out for that.
Trail
just,
cams.
Supply our cameras. That'd be great. Yeah, that's fine.
That's right.
More of them out there. Put the newest ones. I've got the newest one out there. I'll give you a quiz. It's called the dual sensor one, and I just reviewed the footage on that. I got a great new Bobcat video that's at the Wallow up at Twin Lakes, and some good nat sounds. And it has a really nice night. Great. It's got a few things I could write up about it that aren't quite great, but we're trying some of those new cameras out, and they're working so far. That project is, I don't think we'll ever end until, even if we get a Bigfoot, we're going to keep them out there as long as we can and keep going out there. And I think you guys, we all run into this. We have a limited time to go out there, and it seems like quite a bit of time gets sucked up going to the film site. Even though we love going to the film site, we still go there. Every time we drive in, Kip, you've worked that country, and Tate, you've been up there. We look out and we're like, look at all this other country we have not even stepped foot on, or even been close to on that road.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
when you're out there, you can look across and see
There's so
thousands
much
and
land.
thousands and thousands of acres. And there's some of these places you'd have to hike to for a couple of days to get to them. So when you're out there, you realize just how insignificant and how small the area that we are covering with these cameras is. It's minuscule.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, a minuscule. It's just small. So to get the animals that we get, I'm really surprised how much coverage we do get on animals. And that whole
yeah.
So, Rowdy, I got a quick question
go.
for you. Oh, when you're dead. Sorry. When you were mentioning about, Robert bringing those people up through the creek, and we've kind of talked a little bit about it before, just about how remote it is, how it's not necessarily always for the faint of heart, but, if you had somebody come up to you at, maybe recognized you or knew who you were and ran into you at the gas station in Willow Creek and said, hey, we're heading up there. What would be the advice you would give to people that want to go out and try and get to the film site? What kinds of things would you tell them? And I'm talking about the people that would be, your typical, hey, you know what? I just flew in from Philadelphia.
Well,
I've been a
here's a
Bigfoot fan, and
anecdotal story for that. My brother is a glass marble artist. He does these glass flower implosions, and he's gotten to be one of the best people in his field. Anyway, there is a Facebook page that it's called the World's Biggest Marble Hunt, and we decided to take one of his marbles and hide it at the Bluff Creek film site, at the Patterson-Gimlin film site. And I was the first person, I think, in that group to give a video as far as showing the marble, and then give a quick little what do you call it, explanation of where it was at, kind of like a riddle. And I explained that we're kind of in the film site, and I gave a riddle of where it was hidden. And that incited, actually, I think it was 3 families that went out there to actually look for that marble. And I did not give the warning at that time of really how far out that marble was. What I was trying to do was get people to go to our Bluff Creek blog spot or Bluff Creek Project Facebook site page and look up the coordinates and find the directions and all that kind of stuff. And actually, I know for sure 2, but it might have been 3 families went out there. But lo and behold, one of those families got a flat. But somebody was coming in. It was either one of the other families were coming in to look for the marble, and they ran into him at the same time and saved supposedly that family's butt by helping them get out there. So on that note,
lucky.
Yes,
I've gotten a few flats out there.
It's just 20. Well, I can't say it's 26 miles of rough road. If you go up the Go Road, it's a pretty nice road. But once you get committed to the dirt roads, there's a variety of rock out there that seems to slough off the banks, and they all seem to be perfect triangles that point directly up. So they're tire punctures, yes, and you got to have good tires. And I tell people it's not so much that you need a 4x4; you just need to make sure you have quality tires and you have a full size spare. Don't go out there with a spare and expect to get completely out. We had the $10 million production or $10 million Bigfoot bounty. The one coordinating producer, I said, let's all learn how to change tires and where the tire change is. And she's like, no, let's all be optimistic on that. And I go, no, we're not going to be optimistic. Everybody's going to learn how to change the tire, or at least where to change the tire and how to do it before we go out there. And lo and behold, yes, of course, on our convoy, on one of our last nights there with the whole cast, we were leaving, we got a flat and had to change it. It worked out. It's a long ways out. Don't go out without food, without water, even though that's one of the few creeks I would trust to drink out of if I had to. Now, I know when I was doing the scouting for finding Bigfoot, when I was creating all those trails that you guys go down initially, I was out there by myself all one day, and I got down to that, where the washout is, where the creek is. You have to walk down and walk back up on your way down. I actually drank out of that creek most of that day because I was comfortable with where that came from.
Oh, wow.
How it was coming down. I grew up in the hills, so I was used to finding a decent place to drink. It's becoming more and more limited now. In fact, when I was out at Bluff Creek, on that side note, I got a bottle of it right now, still here. I filled up. I found a spring way up on Slate Creek Mountain. I deployed a new camera up there. The dogs and I took a decommissioned road and went mountain biking, went up into the snow line and planted a new camera, and found just a spring coming right out of a road cut. And I filled up one of my water bottles, and that's delightful to have that kind of water. Anyway,
I guess the other thing that we'd probably want to add to people is don't think that your cell phone's going to save you. There is no cell coverage. You are going to be nada. Your cell phone is going to be a paperweight,
at the bottom, yes.
Unless it has a GPS.
And surprisingly, the cell coverage has gotten better. We actually all sit at the top of the road there above the site on the main 12 and 13. And if you have Verizon or US Cellular, actually have coverage, or good enough, I should say. But yes, down at the site and anywhere else except that particular spot, no, you're going to be out of luck. And tell people that you're going out there. That's another thing.
Right.
Give somebody else that information that you're going out there. I tell my wife every time I go out.
Always.
And luckily, I've never been stuck. I almost got stuck a couple of years ago, I think. Then, I had a flat. I think it was.
I'm trying to remember. I think there was. I think it was it last year or the year before? There was a guy out there that came out there, and I think he lived down in Southern California, but he didn't plan his fuel right, and so he didn't have enough gas.
Okay, we're going back to this again.
And I think I had to lend him some fuel, if I recall.
I don't know
It's
what
easy to
you're
do.
talking about.
Easy to do.
That guy.
Well, gas is getting on here, man.
Well,
and whoever's listening to this, if you're really into the Bluff Creek Project, we've got
Godspeed
out this July 10th, 11th, and 12th officially on those days. And if the Six Rivers National Forest is opened up to the public, that will happen. But that's still pending right now. But those are our dates, and we always have a good time out there. The more people, the better. I still have a few things I want to do with a bunch of people, as far as having that daisy chain of everybody with a radio on each of the ridges, lining up and down Bluff Creek. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be
night watch, and
be
we can all
amazing.
daisy chain and listen all night long in our own positions, and because that's what the night thing is. It's just listening and having an experience, and that's kind of what's fun about this. That's kind of what's
Rowdy,
fun about this.
don't tease me like
it
that.
It gets us out in the woods, and like Kipp says, we have a lot of good company and a lot of good times.
Exactly.
Agreed. Well, I guess with that, we have been going for a little over an hour, and It's always fun to talk to you, Rowdy. You've always got some really interesting stuff to tell us and share with the listeners. And so today and tonight was
Yes, it was
no
great to
different.
be
So
on.
appreciate you
And
taking the time.
I'm glad we're doing this podcast. We're having fun with it. Hopefully we get a lot of interesting people that are connected to the Bluff Creek Project, or at least to the Patterson-Gimlin film and the Bigfoot world on. You guys are doing a great job. Thanks.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Rowdy. All right. Well, folks, again, we're the Bluff Creek Podcast. I'm sorry, we're the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. I'm Kipp Morrill, and Tate, what do you got to say?
Have a good night, everybody, and thank you for listening.